really early in our conversation, you said to me, I'm a narcissist. And I was like, oh my God, wait, this guy's telling me he's a narcissist. But I think this is going to be so much better than what a licensed trained psychologist could actually talk about, because welcome to part 1 of this 3-part series on the empath narcissist entanglement. In this session, we bring to light what has been confusing, painful, or difficult to name. We dive into the reality that awareness is liberation, and the moment you understand the deeper dynamics at play, everything begins to shift. If you are ready for clarity, truth, and the awakening of your own sovereignty, you are in the right place. First of all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me into your home. Thank you for inviting me into your heart, and for being willing to do this discussion today. I think there's some really incredible things that can come of this for you, for me, and for all of the listeners, because we're both very much in the space of awakening and helping others in whatever capacity we're called to be in service. So I think today is going to be a really interesting discussion, and I appreciate your time.
It's just great to be here with you and to feel the resonance, the importance of the moment, and just showing up so we can do our soul's work, our heart's work. So Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
I'm really shocked that I've met you.
It
means a
Thank
lot
you.
to me.
Yeah, and a lot to me. And I think for the viewers, a couple of things. I'm not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist, neither is Adam, as far as I know. We're here to have a really in-depth discussion about the empath narcissist entanglement. And so if you feel that you might be in one of these and you're in any form of danger, emotionally, physically, this does not take the place of that. You should definitely reach out to a licensed trained psychologist. But I think this is going to be so much better than what a licensed trained psychologist could actually talk about, because let me back up to say, when I first met you, we know each other through a consciousness club, and we met in person. We were sitting at lunch at a lunch table with lots of other people there. And really early in our conversation, you said to me, I'm a narcissist. And I was like, oh my God, wait, this guy's telling me he's a narcissist. I've been with narcissists in relationships. I'm very much an empath. And then you went on to say, and then I became a spiritual narcissist. And then you said, now and I can't remember, are you a recovering narcissist, or what do you call yourself now?
Well, I'm in recovery. Once a narcissist, always a narcissist. So it's a matter of paying close attention. But I remember that moment when I shared that with you, and I could feel the reaction almost from you very quietly in the field, how powerful it is to be even opening ourselves to this conversation. So it's great to be in it, and let's do it.
Yeah. So then it went to a dinner conversation that I started asking you a lot of questions, because I really wanted to hear from someone who understands narcissism, but's also incredibly spiritual, deeply on their path, and has a lot of wisdom and knowledge to share. And that's when I said, oh my gosh, I think we need to do an interview. And you said, yeah, let's do a 3-part series. So who knows? This could be like a whole 8-part series. We're not sure where Spirit's going to lead us on this. But I think one of the things that, not only your willingness to have the awareness around it, I want to honor the amount of shadow work that you've done in this. And I think that's probably going to be a little bit more into part 2. But let's start with, from your knowledge, because I'm assuming that you've done probably a lot of work on yourself and on understanding what narcissism is. And I would love to hear from your perspective how you view narcissism.
Well, I've been sitting with narcissism for pretty much since I began to think that I was a narcissist, or even just the idea of being selfish and being inconsiderate or unkind And, when that realization began to take place, my nature is to, not just put my toe in the water. I wanted to really get deeply into not only my own personal journey, my own healing journey, my awakening journey, whatever you want to call that. But it began this journey into understanding the depth of the idea of self, which is kind of ego self. It combined a journey into what Carl Jung would refer to as the individuation process, the discovery of our true selves. And that kind of just gave me enough of a taste to realize that, narcissism, that level of absorption and the lack of empathy and the absence of compassion and kindness and all the other attributes that come with a narcissist that I am is insidious.
Yeah.
And it wasn't simply as simple as just say looking in the mirror. It required a much deeper dive, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but we can go.
Yeah. Well, there's two things popping forward. One is I'd love to know when you actually realized that you are a narcissist. And the second, and you can decide which you want to go first, is how do you think you became a narcissist? Going back to the core wound. So whichever you feel you want to jump into first.
Well, we'll go with, my realization of it. And really began, in the early phases of my breakdown. And I was in my early 40s. And I began to really recognize, well, wait a minute, something is not working in my life. And oddly, maybe it's paradoxically, I was at the pinnacle of my life, both in terms of achievement and financial success, and family of 3 beautiful daughters, and now 8 granddaughters.
Wow.
So it began with that breakdown in my family, Beth. And
are you willing to share, the specific of what the breakdown was?
Yeah, well, the breakdown began with really what I didn't know at the time were the telltale signs of my narcissism, which is, would anything be from just gaslighting people to addictions and these kind of things that were very evident in my life, just not being a very nice person and not really caring about anybody other than myself. So it began with, what really had to look at myself, what was going on here. And then my ex-wife just began using this term, you're just a narcissist, Adam.
Oh, interesting.
You're just a narcissist. And of course, initially I just dismissed that.
Yeah.
Like you're, whatever kind of thing. And then it really became, well, what is that all about? And why am I in this state of just unease and unhappiness? And then the recognition that there was something very much astray in my life. And how could I be at the pinnacle of my success in my life seemingly and be so off with the journey that I was on? So this began this deeper dive into narcissism, and was I a narcissist? And then, as many of you know, coming in this journey, begin to recognize, well, I need to own my own shit. And I need to really look deeply at, and honestly at parts of my life that, quite frankly, just felt really unloved.
Yeah.
And that felt very painful. And then that led to quite a few other parts of my healing journey and my study along the way, which we can get into a little bit as we go, as much as you want. But, the emergence of narcissism I would say, that could have been lifetimes ago. And so, but not to get overly abstract and not to get overly into that kind of space, but it came from really a core wound in the early part of my life and my childhood.
Yeah. And I'd like to get into that. I think one of the things that comes though is your wife at the time. So she suddenly declares you're a narcissist, and you're like, what the heck is that? What then happened? Did she take that to the point of saying, I'm leaving you? Or did she say, let's go to therapy? Or, was there anything there that she was able or willing to do in the marriage at the time? Or was it like, I'm out of here?
Well, this came after I was out of there.
Okay.
So this, just to backtrack a bit about that, and just the precursor to that life decision really was a lot of therapy, and both together, but she didn't want to do that eventually, but I knew that I needed to do that.
Yeah.
And so I continued in that process of deeper diving even before that moment came of I must go. And then that energy began, amongst many other very, very difficult things that came out of that moment. But the narcissism piece was really something that did grab a hold of me.
Yeah.
And so, and then that just began the whole spiral downward into what many would say is, the underworld, the unconscious, that we go into the dark and we go into these places that
the dark night of the soul.
It's dark night.
It's deeper than that, even.
It was the beginning of that, and even beyond.
Well, whatever you're willing to share. And the other thing I wanted to say to the viewers is, I think as we go through this discussion, some of it's going to be about your personal life, some of it's going to be about my personal life, and some of it's just going to be about what we've learned in general. So I think not everything you say about narcissists or narcissism means that it is you. It might be that, hey, I've learned this. And so it's not for us to necessarily pick apart our own lives. I think it's to bring the wisdom that we've learned as a result of the parts that we've played, up until now, and just really discovering even more the beauty of this. Because as I said, it is an entanglement that we're talking about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the empath part too. But before I do, I would like to go back to your ideas around, the origination, because you talked about a core wound. It might be slightly different for everyone, but it also feels like there's a real commonality of abandonment, of not feeling loved, of not getting the safety and security as a very small child. That seems to be a theme amongst most narcissistic people. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on that and what you feel for you and for the collective, narcissistic type behaviors. What is that core wound?
Well, yeah, great. Absolutely, to get into that core piece, because that precipitated all else, in the core wound. And and just to create a little context to this, Beth, in the depth of what I've found in terms of my own authentic self, my more true, deeper nature. And I don't want to overuse this term authenticity, but just call it the essence of my own self, and what I ultimately have discovered over this incredible journey. The narcissist is absent of this deeper inner truth of who we all are. And the narcissist is associated really with the identity of being separate. And to your point of what does that mean? Where did that come from? And then we were speaking into how it is originated from this idea for me in my journey, this deep place of being abandoned early on in my life. And abandonment's a big thing. And this is not a statement, about the love and care I have for my wonderful mother and father who have given me everything and have been my greatest teachers. And I'm blessed to still have my 98-year-old mother
Oh, wow.
with me.
Yeah.
And it's been fabulous. But really, if we were going to hack it a little bit, but share personally around that. So that moment where I begin to feel very separate, where I begin to feel very alone, where I begin to feel a sense of abandonment in my life, that moment when that's occurred early on in my life began to be the Adam, you're just making too much noise. Oh, Adam, you be quiet. Oh, Adam, go to your room. Oh, just blank look like you're not even there.
Interesting.
In the presence of your family or your father or your mother. It really became a seed point for that narcissism and that narcissist that I am, because it demands, constant attention.
Yeah.
And and then it just became very insidious of how it would manipulate or control to get attention.
Yeah.
And, and then it just early on, then that just continues to build.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a level of vanity. It becomes a level of arrogance, and then it just showed up in ways that weren't present either.
Yeah.
Just that kind of not nice kind of side.
Yeah.
And it seems to be that is, very prevalent in our male culture today. And so I'm happy we're going.
Yeah. So a couple of things are coming to mind with what you're saying that I actually hadn't 100% thought about until just now. Because narcissism is kind of becoming this big buzzword. I think it's overused at times. I think it's inappropriately used. And I also want to honor that there's a spectrum of narcissistic behavior. And I think when we want to label someone that, we should be very cautious, and that my intention here today too is to pull out the threads of what are the behaviors that are leading into this narcissist, or high on the spectrum, that we want to bring awareness to. Mm-hmm. And what's coming to me is that perhaps this bust in narcissism is also as a result of, if it's back to childhood, of course it is, women started to work. The dynamic of masculine, feminine started to change, which we're going to talk about in part 3 of this. And the intensity of which your parents, my parents, other, older generations' parents, of how they had to participate in the household to even have the mental space, to have the physical space, to have the emotional space to raise children, because no one teaches us how to raise children. It's a free-for-all, I mean, we basically use our own toolbox that we got from our own childhood. And sometimes that toolbox is really lacking. So your parents may have done the best that they could at the time with the information that they had. So that's one. But two is, it may also have been at a time where women were, and I maybe not for your mom, but it might be, but I think even moving forward, that there's more and more women who aren't in the household, or the man is not in the household caring for the children. They're busy working. And I'm wondering how that thread is also impacting our children, has impacted our children generations prior. That, you know what I'm saying? Like to just not be there and have that.
I know exactly what you're saying. Relevant to my particular situation, that my mom was a real forerunner in going to work, because in the 60s, she had her own clothing line, and she was very absent, and there was somebody in the home, taking care of the children. And,
right.
And so there was, quite a bit of that. I mean, in the dynamic, in the proliferation of women working in the workplace, so to speak, and just to survive these days. I mean, my goodness, I can't even imagine. And to two parents working, or even the proliferation of single parent homes,
Yes.
primarily in our minority communities. And what happens very clearly is if you come home, what time do you really even have to give your attention to your children? And how do you want to spend your time with that? So the dynamic did, to your point, start to change. And that was in the 60s. And, and that's just increased more than ever in our culture, with women coming back more into work, having to come more into work, and the whole dynamic of raising children and what that means. Hence, a proliferation of this, what we call narcissist in the world. And of course, this isn't gender specific, but it's, it is primarily related to men or young men, and it's primarily related to a lot of things about how we raise our children, but in how we raise our young men in particular, and how we initiate our young men into the world and bring them into the world, and other than just throw them into the world. It's and this has been quite a journey, and if we think about it, it's been not really much more than the last 50 years that this has really taken place. Now, of course, there's other cultures that are not necessarily orientated this way, but they have their own issues. Eastern cultures have their own issues. Latin cultures have different issues and more, different kinds of things. So this is not necessarily applicable across various different cultures, but it's a reality of the workplace. It's a reality of how men and women how they play their roles in the world. So we become, let's just say, subject to all of this.
Yes, absolutely.
You probably found a little bit yourself.
Yeah, a few more things that come forward to share. This was a conversation I recently had, and it wasn't specific to narcissism, but it was about that core wound of abandonment and that core wound of just wanting the validation of love outside of ourselves. We know self-realization is all about going inward and finding that love within and being able to share it with others. But our conversation today is very specific about empath narcissists, and we're still on the narcissist topic. We will get to the empaths. That the Balinese. So I lived in Bali for 5.5 years. And one of the things, the traditions that they had that I thought was just so interesting was when a baby is born, they hold that baby night and day. The baby sleeps in the bed with them. In fact, they have a ceremony that they have to do for the baby to even touch the ground on their own. And I remember hearing that thinking, wow, like the oxytocin levels, because we know oxytocin, we know the cuddling hormone, like when moms are breastfeeding. And I think that's also part of this, that as women went into the workforce, there was less breastfeeding. There was less of that motherly bond. And the bond that there was, the children craved more. And yet there wasn't more because moms had less and less energy to give to their families. And so did the men. And you're right. Narcissism is not a man's thing. This is men and women. The data skews a little bit more towards men.
Indeed.
But it is about that inner child wanting and needing that safety. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That safety is like, poof, we need that. And I think that we see even today how difficult things are because people aren't feeling safe, and unless they're cultivating and really awakening that inner wisdom and getting that true north for themselves, it's hard. Narcissism or not, empath or not, it's a hard life to be living in some respects. So the Balinese, I wanted to make that point that, I think that they just, and they live in community, they live in, I'm not saying we all need to do that, but they all know that they have a home and they have a family that takes care of them. Lots of other dynamics go on. We know that, but that provides a sense of safety and a sense of, I don't have to fight for the basics. And I think we're missing and lacking that a lot, especially in the Western world. And I'll even say in America. I think America is very individualized. It's created a very dog-eat-dog world and a different idea of what success looks like that has actually been the demise of who we are in society.
Very, 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 very much so. And the Western world in general is the leading edge of narcissism. The U.S. is way out
I'm
in
sure.
front on the narcissist. No, there's not science that way, but there's different types of data that fit into that, whether it's mental illness, whether it's suicide. It's all the very dark statistics that are related to the narcissistic culture and the narcissistic aspect of the patriarchal system and society, which thankfully it's in its own state of demise, and there's a great evolution, which makes this conversation very timely and very important for all of us, but for men, certainly men in particular. And you reminded me of something that early on in my journey to really understand narcissism, and this came from my teacher, who I worked with immensely in this arena, and from many different aspects, meaning psychospiritually. It's not just on the physical plane, but what's happening to me energetically and what's gone on with my own belief systems and my own neurology that gets wired around narcissism. I mean, this isn't just a belief. These are things that are related to our wiring system, our belief systems, our all chemical place of expression.
Yeah.
And, that there's the bigger conversations around that. But one of the things that I was very curious about was when my teacher was talking to me about, there's really, and this comes from Jungian psychology again, but we were talking a little bit about the three types of men. And, the man that initially is the man that just doesn't know he's a man. He kind of is toying, well, what am I and where do I go? And we're seeing a proliferation of men and young men related to their own sexuality, related to their own affirming whether they're a man, they don't want to. So there's this, right? There's all this happening. And then secondarily, there's the other type of man, which Jung referred to as the dangerous man.
Okay.
And, and that's a very big word, but the dangerous man is, lives on the edge, either through addiction, through dangerous behavior, sporting behavior, extreme sporting behavior, excessive work. These are all signs, or some of the key signs of dangerous men. And dangerous men are the greatest form of narcissism. Most narcissists belong to this category.
Yeah.
Because in and of themselves, narcissism is actually fairly dangerous. It's dangerous to the man himself. It's dangerous to the people he
or
loves.
women. Yes.
Yeah, to women. But, we've seen this, with the destruction of really the feminine in all aspects, be it nature and all the things that have happened, these big conversations. But that's the dangerous man. And, that's been the driving force in
yes, and or the dangerous woman, which is, but again, this whole thing I think we'll get into in part 3.
I appreciate that. It makes me feel a little better for you to acknowledge this piece. But this is the truth that I know. And then lastly is which we'll probably move further into. I'll see where we want to go, but really further into our next couple conversation, which is the evolution of the dangerous man. I was the dangerous man.
Well, okay. I love that you bring up Carl Jung. That's one of the topics that I really want to get into because of his work with archetypes. But before we do, I want to share one more story about how I feel narcissism has become a real challenge today. And a dear friend of mine does a birthing technique, even for an adult, and she does it with adults because she has really acknowledged that the way we bring babies into the world today is incredibly traumatic. Like I'm going to say a couple of things. You talked about not the playground, but being at home and having your mom say, Adam, be quiet, go to your room. Don't self-express, right? Like, and not acknowledging you, not seeing you, not because maybe I don't know her, but maybe she didn't have the time. Maybe she didn't have the patience. Maybe she had issues with your dad. Maybe there was a lot of other things happening, right? And yet that was a big, in some respects, a big T trauma for you. And so I don't think we need to, discount anyone's trauma if it's a little T or a big T, but going back to that trauma, coming in in a sterile environment and being popped out and being thrown into a bassinet, and a lot of times they'll do the latching on right away to try to have that bonding really happen between a mom and a baby. And yet other cultures, as according to my friend, I can't remember the culture that she specifically studied with, they have the elder women in the room singing to the babies as they come into the world. There's a whole ceremony about how they're coming out of the womb. The village is there loving the baby. I don't know all the techniques that they do, but when she told me this, I was like, oh my goodness, you're right. And so she did a whole ceremony with me about just even how I entered the world and how I came into the world and reprogrammed that part of me so that I could get to, some of the stuff that might have caused me trauma, as a newborn baby coming out. And of course, there's through the birthing process, there's lots of things that happen. Whether you're someone that gets pulled out with a forceps on your head or, getting spanked, just to make us cry. Or I know when I was a baby, I had to go under a bilirubin light, and be in a little container and be, separated. And there was just a lot of things that happen, I think, to us that take away that safety blanket that we need so much when we're little. So with that, I'm going to transition a little bit into the empath part, because one of the things that I shared with you and I feel so strongly about is that while my parents aren't perfect, my upbringing is certainly not perfect, I actually had the most incredible life as a little child from what I remember. I felt loved. My parents, my mom stayed home. They had a business. They were entrepreneurs, but she found a way to be home with us every day that she could. We had breakfast every day. Once we went to school, my mom went to work at their business that they had. It was a small hardware store in a small town of 2,500 people. And she left her nursing career, and my dad left his teaching career to do this and create an environment that they felt they could raise kids and love their kids and spend the time with their kids, still have a business, make money. Both of them still worked. And I just felt incredibly loved. And beyond my parents, I was part of a church. I grew up Lutheran and Christian. We had a lot of time with the community. And I felt like growing up in a town of 2,500 people taught me so much about accountability and about loving others, almost to the point of a fault, which is going to get into my empath part.
Yeah.
That, it sounds like maybe a silly example, but it's coming to mind to share that I was in high school. And I was coming back from a track meet. I was on the school bus. We were all having a good time. And one of the things in a small town that we had people do was drag Maine. And so we got the bus driver all convinced that he should drag Maine with all of us track people in there. And somewhere along the way back home to our small town, we'd stopped at a rest stop. And I decided I would buy a condom out of the condom machine in the bathroom because, wow. I didn't really know how to use one, and I wasn't sexually active at the time, but I thought it was fun. So as we did the dragging Maine, I decided to blow up the condom and hang the condom out the back window. And I thought that was fun, and it was, and we all laughed. And most of us, I think, on that bus really weren't even sexually active. Well, the reason why I tell you the story is the next day, I got called in to my dad's living room area in the rocking chair, and I had a talking to. And he said, one of the elders from the community came into the hardware store and saw that you had a condom and that it was out the back of the bus. And I was like, oh, like petrified, like what? And he said, my daughter got pregnant and she's moved away, ironically, to California. And he felt like he lost his daughter because pregnancy was frowned upon in a small community and she had to leave. And he didn't want that to happen to my dad or to me. That was like the community. You didn't get away with anything in this small town.
A little troublemaker. You
didn't get away with anything. And the point of it is really that the community raised us together. So there could be downsides to that, but there's upsides to that. And I learned accountability for my actions, not just my actions, not just with the one person, not just with all the fun girls on the bus, but how it rippled out into the community and how, yeah, my actions really can have an impact on a lot of other people. And he came to this with a very loving intention to tell my dad. That's like the level of love and community and attention that I received. And I didn't know any different, actually. I thought everyone had a beautiful upbringing. I knew some people's parents were divorced and I knew there was, troubles, but I didn't recognize the power of the oxytocin that I received on a daily basis from my parents. And I feel, yeah, and I feel today, and it always makes me emotional when I think about it, but I just feel today that like I chose these beautiful parents coming in so that I can have this strong anchor and that I could help other people have this strong anchor. Again, my life isn't perfect by any means, not even close, but there's an element of how I can navigate in the world with a sense of safety, a sense of self-love that I feel was gifted to me. I didn't have to work that hard at it. I was just gifted it. And I feel like my gift to the world now is to continue to shine that light and to show the way for others back to self-love. And again, I still have my own issues with self-love. So I'm not saying I'm Yogananda or Buddha or any of the enlightened masters on earth, but I strive every day to be the best that I can and to really show that love and light. And so the reason why I go deeply into that is that has created in me an identity of an empath, which I really didn't identify with until, I don't know, maybe the last 5 years or something. Yeah. So I feel like the empath part of me is what attracted the narcissist part of me. The first time I talk about this, and we'll talk more about both of our books, but you've read my book, so you know the story of
Great book, great story.
angels, herpes, and psychedelics, unraveling the mind to unveil illusions. There's a devil in here, and the devil was a narcissist, and I didn't even know the word narcissist, and I didn't know the word sociopath, and I wasn't even willing to see it or recognize it until I had escaped this situation and came back to the United States. And the gentleman I refer to as my spiritual healer said to me, Beth, you're with a sociopathic narcissist. And I was like, what? Like, what is that? I just have this desire to see the light in everyone and to see the best in everyone. And yes, I can be picky. And yes, I can be all of these things too, judgmental, but there's something deeply in me that wants to see the best and that wants to do whatever I can to help people feel and see the best in themselves. I also am able to feel people's feelings because I grew up in this small community and I know what it's like to disappoint people. What it's like to disappoint my parents, what it's like to disappoint the guy that witnessed me with the condom. So there's deeply ingrained ideas in my mind about how I need to show up for community and for others. And so having that be my first empath narcissist entanglement almost took me down. Really, I was jobless, I was homeless, I was visaless. I was back in Singapore crying my eyes out. And my friend said, why don't you go to Bali? Like, you love that place and live in the light. And so I did, only to learn a lot of other things that are not part of this series, maybe another series that we can talk about some of those lessons. And then I've encountered, other narcissists since then, or people on the narcissistic spectrum. And there's a theme for me that I really just think, if I love somebody enough, if I just love them more, if I just give more love, that they will wake up, that they will see the light within themselves and things can be happily ever after, whether it's with me or someone else. But but in the process of that, I have to recognize and realize that what I do is I give parts of myself that are just being taken by someone who's either not ready to wake up or isn't meant to wake up in this lifetime, because the entanglement is meant for other really big reasons. And I'll always say that one of the main storylines about the devil in India in my book is to help us all recognize that all of our devils are actually our angels, because they came to play a really, really important part in our life. And so I really honor narcissists actually in a very interesting way, because I think that they're here to not torture the empath. And I think they're here to help the empath with deep discernment, boundaries, really deep nuances that they might not learn without the, I'm not saying every empath has to be with a narcissist, but I can tell you that it's incredibly helpful. It's incredibly helpful to their mission if they survive. And I don't say that lightly, because emotionally, psychologically,
Exactly.
there is a lot of empaths, and just let's say people in general, that don't survive a narcissist because they can be very ruthless. And I'm going to have you talk about more of that, because I think coming from someone who identifies with some of those characteristics and has done all the shadow work to really, I don't know if the word manage is the right word, but to integrate those shadow sides, to understand how it hurts you, it hurts others, and yeah, and how that entanglement can be helpful. This is not a doomsday, saying that narcissists are bad podcast. Actually, it's a let's really acknowledge where the shadow aspects of the empath have to be recognized, because we can torture the narcissist too. And how we torture the narcissist is we shine our light brightly, and we come in with positivity, and we want to love them. And when we shine that light, what does it do? It shows the shadow, and that hurts the narcissist. And the narcissist can get even more, I want to say the word crazy, but I don't like that word, but can get more aggressive, can get more accentuated is the word. The aspects of the narcissist can get more accentuated when the light is shining on, because then everything that they do feels like they're being picked on. Everything feels like, you're coming at me. And not just from the empath, but from people in general. That's one of the aspects that is so difficult, is that internal feeling that I see narcissists having of not being enough, not being seen, not being heard, not being loved. And so they're oftentimes projecting that onto the people they love the most and the people that love them the most. And that creates sort of that entanglement aspect of it.
Indeed, it does. It does, and that unbeknownst to the empath, they're feeding the narcissist.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
in some ways, they're enablers. But first of all, thank you for sharing you and your journey. And I think what's important here is to remember the real power and beauty of being an empath as well, first and foremost. And it's often so easy to look at the dark side of the moon there, so to speak, which we all have that in one degree or the other.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's truly a great strength and a great truth of who we are as human beings, is to embrace our empathic nature and our experiential nature of, having been there and gone through a lot of pain and challenges as well. And, it's such a subtlety in dealing with the relationship between an empath and a narcissist.
Yeah.
And obviously, as it relates to, my journey and as a narcissist, and the willingness, to just override anything else or anybody else, even in their own empathic and sympathetic way, even in giving just some, bluff off with an apology, or, things, how those two dynamics really work together. But, your point, Beth, was so good. What are we here to learn in the entanglement? And how are we to, empower ourselves in the truth of who we are, our boundary, our light, our willingness to really step forth and speak our truth, has never been, more relevant and important than it is today.
Yeah.
The narcissists are drowning out the world. I don't necessarily need to get into examples because they're not very pretty, but I think we see this all over the place.
I want to make a comment on that.
Yeah, please.
This might be a, yeah, just don't shut off the show for now. Listen to the whole thing I'm going to say before you want to jump on me. But this is where I think Trump, because I feel like you're headed that way. We're not going to talk about politics, but leaders like Trump, leaders like Putin, I mean, we could go on and on about a lot of the leaders.
Yeah.
But there is one thing that I really think is available to all of us to understand about a template that Trump is offering us. I'm not his fan. I'm not saying in any way do what he does, the way he does it. No. What I'm saying is that, and this is like a narcissistic template that they believe, at least they project that they believe in themselves so much, but the confidence of which they navigate the world outwardly or project themselves, which doesn't necessarily reflect the internal world that's happening. But if all empaths, light workers, way showers, whatever you want to call yourself, healers, if we all took that level of tenacity to speak our truth in the truth and where we know our truth to be, with the level of confidence, enthusiasm, wherewithal that some of these narcissistic leaders are, the world would change overnight. It would absolutely change overnight. And so I'm just suggesting that we don't be like Trump or Putin or any of these guys. I'm suggesting that we look at the template. Trump studied under Norman Vincent Peale. He went to church every Sunday in New York City to Norman Vincent Peale. And if you look at some of his templates, it's coming from that. So if we did this from the light, from compassion, from empathy, from the love place, again, things would change overnight. So I, even in the face of like the chaos of what is happening with these really influential leaders, or maybe not even influential, well, they're influential because they're speaking their truth, and people want people that are speaking their truth. We just need more of the light and less of the dark.
And think of that if you're running a business.
Yeah.
Thinking of that if you're building community. Think of bringing that part of your life in a way that may be vulnerable, but you're bringing forth that light. You're bringing forth that intensity. You're bringing forth that clarity. And when we do that from a place that's empathetic, yet has its own sense of purpose and expression in a way where we have kindness or compassion or supporting others in our business and in our leadership, that's a game changer. And those that are showing up in that way, not in politics, because that's pretty, that you're going to just get dismissed very quickly. But in our businesses and in other parts of our culture and society, those that are coming forth this way, boldly and bravely, male and female, and that's the new leader going forward that has that grounding in their own light, in their own truth, and that offers so much hope for many of us. And it's good to see that we're tuning to this a little bit more because just in the nick of time.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, I want to go back to something you talked about, which was Carl Jung's work and archetypes, because I wanted to touch on that. What I also think I've learned in my relationships with narcissists is seeing them for their parts. So oftentimes, depending upon the spectrum of someone, there can be a part of them that is incredibly loving, incredibly kind, that really juicy, really authentic, like that. And we can see them as that. And then there's the other parts. And again, it depends upon the person, and we're not getting into anything in particular. I think the point is to talk about the spectrum and to talk about the parts. So if you're feeling like perhaps you're someone watching this that's a narcissist, I think one of the ways that you can get to the depths of this is to understand that there is shadow work and that there is parts of yourself that need work. So there's that part of, and I'll just use this as an example, of Adam that was a small child that was being dismissed, that wasn't being seen, that didn't get the attention that any small child would need. So there's that part of you that needs to be seen. And that part of you, as I heard you say, that learned techniques to be able to get attention because you had to learn these techniques to actually get what you needed as a small child. You did it in a way, I think, that had good intention, which is I'm a small child and I need attention.
Indeed, yeah.
So there's something very positive about what you were trying to do, but the mechanism behind it became very shadow and became very taking in a way that wasn't healthy, because you needed to build a toolbox to survive and to feel loved and to feel seen as a small child. There's that archetypal part of it. I've done a lot of work with Carolyn Miss, and I really liked how she took Carl Jung's work and brought it in a little bit more contemporary way. And, she speaks of 12 archetypes that we all have that are different, but 4 of them are the same for every single one of us, according to her, and perhaps even Carl. One is the saboteur, one is the victim, one is the prostitute, and the other one is the child. And there are 6, I'm sure there's many more, but according to Carolyn, there's 6 different child archetypes. There's the wounded child, there's the magical child, there's the nature child, there's the abandoned child. When I started doing that work and started to realize, well, what is my child archetype? It was a really big process. And so I think for anyone who's feeling, well, any of you, but the narcissistic spectrum, like just going back and saying, well, what is my child archetype? Because a lot of times it is that abandoned child, or it is the wounded child that's deep in there. And so that archetypal work, I think, can really help people start to identify. And as I said, the same for the empath, because I started to learn more about how my inner child, I'm more the nature child, connected to nature, connected to animals, connected, in that way. So yeah, that work comes forward as, I think, a way. But you've done so much work. I would love to hear, if you're willing to share, how did you get to some of those shadow aspects of yourself?
Well, you're bringing up one of the main things, and that is the importance of really looking at archetypal energies. And, one of the first books that I read, and I remember it very distinctly when I read it, it was in January 2004, and I was reading Carolyn Myss's Sacred Contracts.
Yeah, I love that one too.
Where this emerges from is understanding these archetypal energies. And, it's such a good thing you've brought this up, because, we want to heal our lives. We do when we choose to do this. We go to therapy, and, and that can be really hit and miss. And
can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
I want to get into the archetypes, but I see therapy sometimes as a help, but sometimes as a hindrance, because it also feels sometimes that the therapist is another character for the narcissist to manipulate and to try to bring, I'm not necessarily saying you, but I'd like your opinion on it, especially when it's maybe even couples therapy, that they're still trying to be seen as that part of themselves that's great, because they're still trying to avoid that part of themselves that's hurting them and hurting others that they love and that love them. But what is your thoughts on therapy?
I've had a lot of it and spent a lot of money on it, and then I gave up on it entirely. And the reason for that was pretty much what you just said. It was a little bit of self-deception, and that bless the couple therapists that I've had, I've really found one I spent a lot of time with, but often the ability to get you beyond what you really want to look at is just not there.
Yeah.
It can be a lot of just listening or asking fairly innocuous type of questions, and it really, it can become part of, like I said, our own self-deception. And the narcissist is the master of self-deception, because they've deceived themselves first and foremost. We don't even understand our own very nature and our own ground. We understand it as this wounded piece of ourselves. So when we begin the journey saying, well, what's that all about? Then, it's the wounded child. As compared to a magical child, and these various parts of our journey that we can take. And the reason why the archetypes are so important is it offers us perspective. So if you're in the weeds of your narcissism and you have enablers in your narcissistic world, how are you ever supposed to see, any kind of contrast other than when you burn up, or something terrible happens, or you crash your car, or you're fighting with people you love, or you're angry, or all the things that narcissist does. And until that moment that begins to look, how do I get out of this very vicious, insidious nature of being a narcissist? That journey begins by looking at different archetypal energies and understanding ourselves. Well, maybe I am that wounded child. Oh, maybe I also can have a piece of magical child in myself.
Yeah.
Or maybe it becomes more archetypal just by connecting with parts of our natural world and nature. That became a very big part of my journey, is just connecting with the energy of nature, which is very feminine in its orientation. It's very welcoming and accepting in its nature. So there were the environment of which I began the healing journey, which is really a strong advocate for others, really offers people a way to how to do that without just looping in the same old thing. So archetypes are a very powerful way to go about this. Certainly explore more. Pretty much a simplification. It is a seed point and a beginning point.
Yes. And I wanted to add, for anyone who's not familiar with archetypes, that because the 4 that I listed, I remember when I read them, I'm like, oh, I'm not a prostitute. I'm not a saboteur, maybe I am a little bit. I'm not a victim. Okay, well, maybe I feel like that sometimes. And then I realized, oh, okay, there's a light side and a dark or shadow side. It's not about good and bad. It's about how the energies, the duality of it plays. And so I think that's where we look at like the saboteur, and there's times where we're just self-diminishing, where we're self-doubting, and that's the shadow side of it. And so when we start to shine light on it, then we can start to see, oh, okay, I want to be in that confident, I'm talking, cheerleading myself side of it. And a lot of times I kind of think of them as like the voices that are on your shoulders. There's sort of the good voice, and then the not so good voice, the one that tells you you're not good enough, that you're doing it wrong, or that you should know better, or whatever those are, but it's over here. And then there's little cheerleader. It's finding the balance so that we go, okay, well, yeah, I need to just still be accountable. And here, like, what are the consequences of this action? But also, hey, like, I know who I am, and I'm really going to achieve what it is that I set out to achieve with this goal or this intention. The archetypes are all about the light and the dark, not just the dark or the shadow side. And yeah, so I think that's an important thing to note. The other thing that comes forward is just to share 2 other modalities that I really find to be helpful. One is family constellation work. Family constellation work gets at those parts of our family system that influenced us and created some of the trauma, things that maybe we didn't even know happened, that perpetrator prey idea, and the balancing back and forth, the things that cause the big T's, the little T's. It might be within the family dynamic with a brother or sister, or it might be something that's coming down the line that maybe, I'm not saying this for you, but as an example, maybe your mother was not, or your father, his father was not paying attention to him as a child, or maybe there was something that really happened there that also came down the lineage that has nothing to do with their current reality, that there was just, and that I think also speaks to something you talked about early on, which is the patriarchal lineage, and how that has had an impact on just how we navigate in the world with masculine, feminine, and masculine in some ways taking down the feminine, harnessing, wanting to control the power of the feminine. And the tables are turning, and and mixing, and things are really on, I think, a different trajectory right now. Yeah, well, and it's also been that women have very much fallen into the masculine to a point where they're not harnessing the
And a lot of that's still going on.
Yeah, so everything is still in process.
Yes, it is.
I digress slightly on that, but I think it's an important part to just understand the dynamics of our family system, our ancestral lineage, and how that can impact our psyche and the parts of ourselves. A third way to get at this, so one was the archetypes, the second was family constellation, and the third is something called IFS, which is internal family systems, and that is another way to get at the parts and to name the parts so that we can have more awareness. Because from what I've heard you tell me, I think even outside of this interview, actually, you've been able to, in a sense, manage some of these parts. Like you have awareness, like, oh, whoops, okay, that's that part of me that wants to be seen. That's that part of me that needs something from someone else. Oh, let me sit back and let me identify with that so I can integrate that and then come at it from a different way. Come at it from a way that's not manipulating, that's from the heart, that's loving. And so that's, I feel like what you've described to me, or at least that's what I'm feeling from you, that how you've been able to come at this. And so working with someone, for anyone who's feeling either side of this entanglement, I think parts work can be really, really helpful. Now, there's a couple more things, and then I think we're down to the hour on our first part one. So much juicy information here. I also had asked, we sat at a table together, I think it was the Transcendence Conference, and I asked a very well-known light language healer, clearer, sorry, Ken, I can't remember exactly what your titles are and what you do, but you're very powerful in your work. And I just happened to say, because Adam had told me earlier that day that he was a narcissist. So I said to Ken, do you think that narcissists can be healed, since he's the healer, the clearer, the everything? And I just remember, and I think you remember this too. When I asked that question, and he said no, they can't be healed. And he said it's I don't know exactly the words, but do you say a template that they come in with, whatever? And I remember looking at Adam thinking, I really want to ask Adam right now, but I'm not going to, because this doesn't feel appropriate. Yeah. So I want to ask you now, like, what is your feeling on that when someone who it's of, I'm not saying he's the be all end all, but he's someone who can clear energies, entities and whatnot, and he's saying no, a narcissist can't be healed. I mean, how did that make you feel, and what is your response, not to him but to us, to the collective of, what's is it possible?
I remember that moment distinctly, and I was showing out. Isn't that interesting that Beth is asking this question at this moment in this man? And of course, I knew in a very non-secular way that you were addressing what we've been sharing earlier in our conversations.
But also for myself, not even about you, about narcissists at large.
And I'm gonna answer it. I'm gonna answer it as follows. Yes, narcissism can be cured, and
okay.
So we'll start with the and, because the attributes and nature of narcissism in my own personal life was an aspect that I acknowledge, and I do not deny that. I don't, for 1 minute, say that this is not part of my life and I've healed it and it's gone away. I only say that it was an old part of my design and my senses of my own identity. The yes is it can be healed, because ultimately the journey to if you choose to do the work, reveals the place within ourselves and the place within my own truth as a man, as a heart, as a soul, as a human being, that is absence of narcissism. There's no narcissism. It isn't allowed to come into that inner sanctum bath of my own divinity. It's a yes and ultimately I believe that the journey of narcissism is the journey in and through the darkness of our own underbelly of our lives, an identity of our own wounding, of who we actually think we are, but the truth is that it's not the truth of who we are, and at the same time is a clear acknowledgement of what this is. And I continue to watch my narcissistic nature because of the insidious nature of it. It is gradually lessened it does not have a stranglehold on my life like it did. It not even close anymore.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that the field isn't there. I mean, the nature of our human biology and psychology and wiring and the alchemical nature of all of that that's not in this holistic our own truth is a place that has been developed perhaps through lifetimes. So the miracle of healing this in this time is available for everybody. But I'm still in it and dancing that I go, there you go again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I was only smiling perhaps inappropriately as you spoke some of that because to an empath, that's music to our ears. Oh my God, he can change. They can change. And so I think what I want to do is try to really close up this segment, but leave everyone on a bit of a
second. Wait a second. What about the empath? What is the empath? Can the empath's relationship with narcissism be healed? Maybe we should just touch that.
Yeah, let's that. I think that's good.
I think that would circle you.
And I think we're going to get into a lot of that in the next as well, but I want to answer it that I think that, well, okay. So I'm still going to go with the next part that was coming to me to share, because it brings such hope, as I was saying. And I remember, and I don't expect that you will remember because I was taking notes. Otherwise I wouldn't remember. I said to you, one of the last times we were together, I said, okay, so Adam, you know narcissism. If you were going to be in a relationship with me, not necessarily you specifically, but you as representing a narcissist, what would you do with me? And I'm going to read to you what you told me.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm not saying that it was about you and me. It was about you representing the narcissist and me seeing me as the empath and who it is I am.
There's a lot to this, but give it a go.
Okay, these were the things, yes. And then I'm still going to try to answer your question, but it's going to lead us into the next segment. So you said a narcissistic male with me, Beth Bell, would be impulsive, manipulate and control the power of who you are, deep sexual innuendos, control and repress you in your power, retribution of how he was treated in his early years, doesn't see you, sees something he wants to conquer, a projected part of his life that he never lived, a man so obsessed in his own story, he can't even be with you, and a projection of the unloved parts of himself. Yeah, that was pretty powerful what you shared with me. And so I appreciated, just to hear that perspective. So Ken, going back, we're going to talk more about this on the next one. That was kind of the lead in, but I'll also leave that, can an empath really heal? And I think that you've already touched on some of it. And that is, there are lots of things and lessons the empath can learn about boundaries, discernment. And I think that the biggest part of this discussion is for the awakened souls on planet Earth, whether you're a man or a woman, an empath or a narcissist, but mostly empaths in this particular discussion, you need to know when to leave, because people earn the right to be left. And we enable, as empaths, it is our shadow side, that when we don't take accountability, because we're blindsided just as much as the narcissist is in some aspects, different aspects, but the narcissist has to come to humility and the empath has to come to discernment. And the path to that and understanding oneself to the depths that's necessary to be standing upright as an awakened, I don't like the word warrior, but it's what's coming right now, is so important, because we need to know when it's time to let go. And to me, as an empath, that is hands down the hardest thing that I ever do, is to let go, especially when someone tells me that they are doing the work, that they want to do the work, and they're committed to doing the work, even though the behaviors don't necessarily show it. So
we pick it up. I'll point to one question
okay.
that'll help you answer. Is it time for me to leave?
Oh, yes, I want to hear your question, but I'm telling you that every empath actually knows. They already know. They just don't want to hear it. And that's another shadow aspect of the empath. So I can't wait to hear what you're going to say about this on the next one. So stay tuned. If this episode brought clarity or resonance, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs this message today. Your engagement amplifies the light and helps this work reach the hearts that are ready to awaken. Subscribe to follow the full 3-part series on the empath narcissist entanglement and to receive access to all upcoming wisdom sessions and insights. Let's heal our hearts, reclaim our power, and rise to the next level of humanity together in sovereignty.